Chapter 5, in which Cimmerian receives a formal call from her companions in dire captivity. Kazul slept late the following morning, and Cimmerian was afraid she would leave before Cimmerian had a chance to ask about the dragon's after-dinner conversation. To her relief, Kazul called her in as soon as she was thoroughly awake and asked Cimmerian to bring in the brushes for cleaning her scales. "What was that crystal your friend mentioned last night?" Cimmerian asked as she laid out the brushes. "The one she thought King Tokaz could somehow use to find out what the wizards are doing." "Ah, the king's crystal," Kazul said. "It's one of the magical objects that belongs to the king of the dragons." "But what does it do? And why did Warog think that King Tokaz wouldn't want to use it?" "Using the crystal is difficult and tiring, and Tokaz is getting old," Kazul replied. "Zareth was right to say that the crystal ought to be used, but it will take more evidence than we have right now to persuade the king of that. As to what it does, the crystal shows things that are happening in other times and places. It's useful, but it can be very difficult to interpret correctly." "Oh, a crystal ball," Cimmerian said, nodding. She tapped Kazul's side, and the dragon bent her elbows so that the scales were easier to reach. "The court wizard at Linderwall had one, but I had to stop my magic lessons before he got a chance to show me how to work it." "The king's crystal is more like a plate, but the principles are the same," Kazul said. "A crystal plate?" Cimmerian blinked. "No wonder nobody talks about it much. It just doesn't sound right." Kazul shrugged. "The king's crystal is much more accurate than an ordinary crystal ball, and if crystal plate sounds odd to most people, it means that fewer of them will try to steal it." "Was that what the silver-green dragon meant when he said that if the wizards started wandering through the mountains, you'd lose half your magic in no time? I never heard that wizards stole magic rings and swords and things." "Not magic things," Kazul said. "Magic. Wizards steal magic. That's where their powers come from." "How can a wizard steal magic?" Cimmerian said skeptically. She climbed on a stool and began working at the ribs of Kazul's wings. "Wizards' staffs absorb magic from whatever happens to be nearby," Kazul said, stretching out her left wing so Cimmerian could get to the base. "That's why they're always hanging around places like the Mountains of Mourning and the Enchanted Forest. The more magic there is in the area, the more their staffs can soak up." "What would happen if someone stole a wizard's staff? Would the wizard still be able to use it?" "The wizard wouldn't be able to work any magic until he got it back," Kazul said. "Most of them have a great many anti-theft spells on their staffs for exactly that reason. Of course, it happens anyway now and then, and as long as the wizard and the staff are separated, the staff doesn't absorb magic." "It doesn't sound like a very good arrangement to me," Cimmerian said. "I can think of half a dozen ways a staff could be lost or forgotten or stolen or something. It doesn't seem sensible for a wizard to depend so much on anything that's so easy to mislay." Kazul shrugged. "They seem to like it." "I can see why you don't want them in your part of the mountains." "Can you? Do you have any idea how unpleasant it is to have a part of your essence sucked out of you without so much as a by your leave? Not to mention the side effects." "Side effects?" Cimmerian said, puzzled. "There, turn around, I'll do your other side." "Roxim isn't the only dragon who's allergic to wizards," Kazul said dryly as she shifted her position. "Or rather, to their staffs. We all are. Roxim's just a little more sensitive than most. That's why we made the agreement with them in the first place." "The dragons have an agreement with the wizards?" Kazul nodded. "To be precise, the king of the dragons has an agreement with the head of the Society of Wizards. The wizards stay out of our portion of the Mountains of Mourning, and we allow them partial access to the Caves of Fire and Night. At least that's the way it's supposed to work. King Tokaz is getting old and forgetful, and lately the wizards have been turning up in all sorts of places they aren't supposed to be." "Like that wizard Zeminar I met on the path," Cimmerian said. "Do you think he really was the same Zeminar that's the head of the Society of Wizards?" "I doubt that anyone, even another wizard, would dare impersonate him," Kazul said. "He has a nasty reputation." Cimmerian remembered the hard black eyes and sharp features of the wizard she had met. He had certainly looked nasty enough, even when he was pretending to be nice. He was sneaky too, or he wouldn't have tried to trick her. And he had been very annoyed when Cimmerian got off the ledge without his help. Cimmerian frowned. "I wonder what he wanted, really," she mused. "Do you suppose he'll stop by the way that he said he would?" I almost wish he would try, Kazul said. There was an angry glint in her eye, and her claws made a scratching sound against the stone floor of the cave as she flexed them. Don't wiggle, Cimarine said. If Zeminar is as tricky as everyone says, he won't come while you're here. He'll wait until you've gone somewhere and I'm alone. True, Kazul frowned. Then she looked at Cimarine, and her eyes took on a speculative gleam. He probably thinks you're as silly as most princesses, so he'll be hoping to trick you into giving him whatever he's after. And if he does, then maybe I can fool him instead, Cimarine finished. And once we know what he's after, we can decide what to do about it. Kazul and Cimarine discussed this idea while Cimarine finished brushing the dragon's scales. There was very little they could do to prepare, since they did not know when Zeminar might show up at the cave or what he might do when he arrived. Then Kazul went off to inspect the ledge where Cimarine had met the wizard to see whether bits of it were still invisible. When Kazul had gone, Cimarine went into the library to hunt through all the books of scrolls and spells. The behavior of the dragons at dinner the previous evening had made a considerable impression on her, and she wanted to see whether she could find a spell to fireproof herself. Until then, she hadn't realized that when a dragon lost his temper, he started breathing fire. Not that she was planning to do anything to irritate Kazul, or any other dragon for that matter, but the dragons at dinner had been too annoyed to be careful, and she didn't want to get burned by accident, no matter how sorry the dragon might be afterwards. At first, Cimarine didn't have much luck. She hadn't had time to do much organizing in the library, and most of the books and scrolls were lying in haphazard, dust-covered piles. Some had even fallen onto the floor, and there were spiders everywhere. Cimarine realized that if she wanted to find anything, she was going to have to do some more cleaning first. With a sigh, she went to get a bucket of water, some clothes for washing and dusting, and a handkerchief to tie over her hair. She worked for several hours, dusting books and manuscripts, wiping off dirty bookshelves, and putting the books back in neat rows when the shelves were dry. She found 2 books and 5 old scrolls that looked as if they might be interesting. These she set on one of the tables to look at later. She had just pulled a stained and yellow stack of papers out of the back of the second-to-last bookshelf when she heard someone hallooing outside. "Oh, now what?" she muttered crossly. She set the papers on the table with the rest of the books she was planning to look at later and went to see who was there. To her surprise, the noise was coming from the back entrance, not from the mouth of the cave. She hurried into the passage, round the corner, and found herself facing 3 beautiful, elegantly dressed princesses. They were all blonde and blue-eyed and slender, and several inches shorter than Cimarine. The first one wore a gold crown set with diamonds, and her hair was the color of sun-ripened wheat. The second wore a silver crown set with sapphires, and her hair was the color of crystallized honey. The last wore a pearl-covered circlet, and her hair was the color of ripe apricots. They looked rather taken aback by the sight of Cimarine in her dust-covered dress and kerchief. "Oh, bother," Cimarine said under her breath. Then she smiled her best smile and said, "Welcome to the caves of the Dragon Kazul. May I help you with anything?" "We have made the perilous journey through these tunnels to see the Princess Cimarine, newly come to these caverns, to comfort her, and together bemoan our sad and sorry fates," the first princess said haughtily. "Tell her we are here." "I'm Cimarine," Cimarine said. "I don't need comforting, and I'm not particularly sad or sorry to be here, but if you'd like to come in and have some tea, you're welcome to." The first 2 princesses looked as if they would have liked to be startled and appalled by this announcement, but they were much too well-bred to show what they were feeling. The princess with the pearl circlet looked surprised and rather intrigued, and she glanced hopefully at her companions. They ignored her, but after a moment the first princess said grandly, "Very well, we will join you then," and swept past Cimarine into the cave. The other princesses followed, and the one with the pearl circlet giving Cimarine a shy smile as she passed. Cimarine, wondering what she had gotten herself into, brought up the rear. The princesses stopped when they reached the main cave, and the ones in the gold and silver crowns looked a bit disgruntled. The one in the pearl circlet stared in unabashed amazement. "My goodness," she said, "you certainly do have a lot of space." "Alienora!" the gold crown princess said sharply, and the princess with the pearl circlet flushed and subsided, looking unhappy. This way, Cimmerian said hastily, and led the 3 princesses into the kitchen. Oh, do sit down, she said, waving at the bench beside the kitchen table. The gold crown princess looked at the bench with distaste, but after a moment she sat down. The other 2 followed her example. There was a brief silence while Cimmerian filled the copper tea kettle and hung it over the fire, and then the gold-crowned princess said, I am remiss in my duties, for I have not yet told you who we are. I am the Princess Caradwell of the kingdom of Raxwell, now captive of the dread dragon Gornal. This, she nodded toward the princess in the silver crown, is the Princess Helana of the kingdom of Pornbuth, now captive of the dread dragon Zareth. And this, she waved at the girl in the pearl circlet, is the Princess Alienora of the Duchy of Toron Marsh, now prisoner of the dread dragon Warog. Pleased to meet you, Cimmerian said. I am Princess Cimmerian of the kingdom of Linderwall, now princess of the dragon Kazul. What sort of tea would you like? I have blackberry, ginger, chamomile, and gunpowder green. I'm afraid I used the last of the lapsang souchong this morning. Blackberry, please, Caradel said. She gave Cimmerian a considering look. You seem to be most philosophic about your fate. Would that I had so valiant a spirit, Helana said in failing accents, but my sensibility is too great, I fear, for me to follow your example. If you don't like being a dragon's princess, why don't you escape? Cimmerian asked, remembering that Kazul had said that 3 princesses in a row had run away from the yellow-green dragon morons. Caradel and Helana looked shocked. Without being rescued? Helana faltered. Walk all that way with dragons and trolls and goodness knows what else is hiding in the rocks ready to eat me? Oh, I couldn't. It isn't done, Caradel said coldly. And I noticed that you haven't tried it. But I'm enjoying being Kazul's princess, Cimmerian said cheerfully. I suppose I might have been upset if I'd been carried off the way you were, but I can hardly complain as it is, can I? Alienora leaned forward. Then you really did volunteer to be Kazul's princess. Caradel and Helana turned and stared at their companion. And where did you get that ridiculous idea, Alienora? Helana said. Warog said, Alienora faltered. You must have misunderstood, Caradel said severely. No one volunteers to be a dragon's princess. It isn't done. Actually, Alienora is quite right, Cimmerian said as she set the teacups in front of her visitors. I did volunteer. She smiled sweetly at the thunderstruck expressions on the faces of the first 2 princesses. I got tired of embroidery and etiquette. Caradel and Helana seemed unsure of how to take this announcement, so they made polite conversation about the tea and asked Cimmerian questions about the current fashions. Alienora didn't say very much, and a few times she tried, either Caradel or Helana jumped on her. Cimmerian felt rather sorry for Alienora. The princesses swept off at last, still somewhat puzzled by Cimmerian's attitude. Cimmerian gave a sigh of relief and set about cleaning up the kitchen. She was just rinsing the last of the cups when she heard someone hesitantly clearing her throat behind her. Cimmerian turned and saw Alienora standing timidly in the doorway. Oh, hello again, Cimmerian said. Did you forget something? Not exactly, Alienora said. I mean, I told Caradwell I did, but actually I just wanted to get away from them for a while. I hope you don't mind. Oh, I don't mind at all as long as you don't expect more hospitality, Cimmerian assured her. I have to get back to work in the library. Oh, what are you doing? Alienora asked. She seemed really interested, so Cimmerian explained about the fireproofing spell. Oh, it sounds like a wonderful idea, Alienora said when Cimmerian finished. The dragons are careful around us, but it would be nice not to have to depend on them not to lose their tempers, she hesitated. May I help? I don't think Kazul would mind, Cimmerian said, but you better change clothes first. The library isn't very clean, I'm afraid. Alienora looked down at her silk gown, which was embroidered heavily with silver and pearls, and giggled. Cimmerian took her into the bedroom and found a plain, serviceable cleaning dress in the magic wardrobe. It took 2 tries before the wardrobe figured out that she wanted a dress for someone else, but once it caught on, it provided a splendid selection in Alienora's size. Then they went to the library and got to work. Cleaning was much more enjoyable with Alienora for company. By the time they finished dusting and straightening the last bookcases, the two girls were fast friends, and Alienor was comfortable enough to ask Cimarine straight out how it was that she had come to volunteer for a dragon. "It's a long story," Cimarine said, but Alienor insisted on hearing it. So Cimarine told her, and then asked how Alienor had happened to be carried off by Wrede. To her surprise, Alienor flushed. "I think it was the only thing left that they could think of," she said not very clearly. "My family, I mean." "I don't understand," Cimarine said. "It's because I'm not a very satisfactory princess," Alienor said. "I tried. I really did, but it started when the wicked fairy came to my christening." "Oh, she put a curse on you?" "No, she ate cake and ice cream until she nearly burst and danced with my Uncle Arthur until 2 a.m. and had a wonderful time. So she went home without cursing me, and Aunt Ermintrude says that's where the whole problem started." "Well, lots of princesses don't have christening curses," said Cimarine. "Well, not if a wicked fairy comes to the christening," Alienor said positively, "and that was only the beginning. When I turned 16, Aunt Ermintrude sent me a gold spinning wheel for my birthday, and I sat down and spun. I didn't prick my finger or anything." Cimarine was beginning to see what Alienor was getting at. "Well, if you didn't have a christening curse, so Aunt Ermintrude told Mama to put me and a spinning wheel in a room full of straw and have me spin it into gold," Alienor went on. "And I tried, but all I could manage was linen thread, and who ever heard of a princess who can spin straw into linen thread?" "It is a little unusual, certainly." "Then they gave me a loaf of bread and told me to walk through the forest and give it to someone or anyone who asked. I did exactly what they told me, and the second beggar woman, who was a fairy in disguise, but instead of saying that whenever I spoke, diamonds and roses would drop from my mouth, she said that since I was so kind, I would never have any problems with my teeth." "Really? Did it work?" "Well, I haven't had a toothache since I met her." "Well, I'd much rather have good teeth than have diamonds and roses come out of my mouth whenever I said something," Cimarine said. "Think how uncomfortable it would be if you accidentally talked in your sleep. You'd wake up rolling around on thorns and rocks." "Oh, that never occurred to me," Alienor said, much struck. "Was that everything?" Cimarine asked. "No," Alienor said. "Aunt Ermintrude persuaded one of her fairy friends to give me a gown and a pair of glass slippers to go to a ball in the next kingdom over, and I broke one before I even got out of the castle." "Well, that's not so surprising," Cimarine said. "Glass slippers are for deserving merchants' daughters, not for princesses." "Try telling Aunt Ermintrude that," Alienor said. "I think she was the one who found out that Wrede was going to ravage a village just over the border and arranged for me to go and visit on the right day so that I could be carried off. She didn't even warn me. I suppose she thought that if I knew, I'd mess it up somehow." "I don't think I would get along very well with your Aunt Ermintrude," Cimarine commented thoughtfully. "Oh, it wasn't so bad, at least at first," Alienor said. "Wrede ignored me most of the time, especially after he found out that I can't cook, and it was a real relief not to have Aunt Ermintrude around anymore. Only then Gornal brought Caradel and Zareth brought Helena, and they've been making your life miserable ever since, Cimarine finished. Why don't you stand up to them?" "Oh, I tried, but you don't know what they're like," Alienor said, sighing. "Caradel goes on and on about correct behavior, and Helena dissolves in tears as soon as it looks like she's losing an argument. And they've both had dozens of knights and princes try to rescue them. I've only had 2. "How do you do it?" Cimarine asked. "I've had 9 already, and they're a dreadful nuisance." Alienor stared at Cimarine and then began to giggle. "What's so funny?" Cimarine demanded. "Caradel bragged for a week because 2 knights and a prince tried to rescue her the first month she was here," Alienor explained between giggles. "She said it was some kind of record. You've barely been with Kazul for 4 weeks, and you've had 9? And you didn't even mention it when Caradel was here. Oh, she's gonna be furious when she finds out." "Oh, if she wants 'em, she can have 'em," Cimarine said. Her expression grew thoughtful. "Maybe they'd be easier to get rid of if I sent them along to another princess instead of just trying to get them to go home." "Oh," said Alienor, and went off into gales of laughter again. Cimarine gave her a questioning look. Oh, it's the idea of Caradoc being rescued by a second-hand knight? Alienora gasped. Oh dear. Cimarine's eyes began to dance. Oh, I could take a good look at them first to make sure they're worthy of her before I sent them on, she suggested. This was too much for them, and they both collapsed in laughter. You wouldn't really, would you? Alienora said when she began to recover. Send the knights to rescue someone else? I certainly would, Cimarine said emphatically. I meant it when I said they were a nuisance. I wouldn't want to upset Caradoc, though. I'll have to think about the best way of handling it. It's a good thing there probably won't be any more of them for a few weeks. I should have plenty of time to figure something out. How do you know that? Alienora asked. Cimarine explained about the sign and Thranduil and her sprained ankle. Alienora was impressed and promised to help if she could. I'll tell Helena that you've twisted your ankle, and I know she'll tell the next knight who comes to rescue her, and then it won't matter if your Prince Thranduil doesn't tell anybody. This settled, the two girls sat down and began looking through the books and scrolls Cimarine had piled onto the table. Alienora, having been brought up as a proper princess despite the tiny size of her country, did not read Latin, so Cimarine had to examine these scrolls herself. There was a sizable stack of books left, however, and Alienora waded into them with a will. It was Cimarine, however, who finally found the spell they were searching for. I think this is it, she said, looking up from an ancient crumpled scroll. Being a spell for the resisting of heat and flames of all kinds, in particular those in which are products of magical beasts, she read. Yes, there's a list, and it includes dragons. I would think dragons would be at the top, Alienora said. Is it difficult? It doesn't look hard, Cimarine said, studying the page. Some of the ingredients are pretty rare, but it says you only need them for the initial casting. After that, you can reactivate the spell just by throwing a pinch of dried feverfew in the air and reciting a couplet. Oh, that's not bad, Alienora said. She came around the table and peered over Cimarine's shoulder at the faded ink. Is it Latin? No, it's just an ornate style of writing, Cimarine assured her. It's not hard to read once you get the hang of it. See, there's the couplet. Power of water, wind, and earth, turn the fire back to its birth. It's a variation on a dragon spell, Cimarine added thoughtfully. How do you know that? Alienora asked. The court wizard at home mentioned it when he was teaching me magic, Cimarine replied, studying the directions. Then maybe it really will work on dragonfire. Can we get all the ingredients for the initial casting? I think so, but it'll take a while, Cimarine said. I don't have any wolfsbane, and I'm not at all sure about unicorn water. Come on, let's check and see what we need to get. They took the scroll into the kitchen and began hunting through the shelves and supplies. They found more of the ingredients than Cimarine had expected, and she began to wonder whether one of Kazul's previous princesses might have studied magic. They did not, however, find any wolfsbane or unicorn water, nor were they able to locate any white eagle feathers. Alienora discovered a very cobwebby jar labeled powdered hen's teeth, but it was quite empty. Cimarine made a list of ingredients they still needed, while Alienora changed back into her pearl-embroidered dress. Alienora took a copy of the list and went back to her quarters, much excited to see whether she happened to have anything useful in the dusty, disused corner of her dragon's kitchen. Cimarine doubted she would find anything, but there was no harm in letting her look. As soon as Alienora left, Cimarine tidied up the kitchen and put all but 2 of the books back on the shelves in the library. One was the scroll of spells in which she had found the fireproofing spell, because she wanted to take a more careful look at some of the other charms and enchantments it described. The other book was a fat volume bound in worn leather with the words Historia Dracorum in cracked and flaking gold leaf on the cover. Cimarine had decided it was time she really got to work on her Latin.